it's not like the doors just open wide for him and the light shown and he can just step right in and do whatever the fuck he pleases. So people need to get over that. And the problem with that, the problem with feeling that way is that you kind of open up that reality a bit more than it really should be open. We should understand that the people in the USA matter and that it's really about us. It's not about the government. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about us.
Well, Leo, the whole problem with Trump is he has the same problem a lot of our generation has. His memory is fading. He forgets the problems that he created for himself in Trump 1.0 when he promised all these grand things and the reality stepped in and said, oh, no, you can't do that. There is a process. And it's hard. When you deal with a government, it is really hard to escape the process.
Hey, welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Plutopia News Network podcast. Today, we don't have a guest. You just have to listen to Scoop and I ramble on, but we got a lot to talk about.
Boy, do we ever.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time. May you live in interesting times, as they say.
Yeah, that's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, yeah. So, what do you think, Scoop? Where shall we start?
There is a plethora of starting points. I don't know. There's so much going on. We've got a new felon in office. I mean, or almost assume office. You know, California's on fire. You know, I have new toys that I'm playing with right now. So, any place you want to start?
Well, I suppose we could start by mentioning that the election having taken place and January 6th having come and gone, Donald Trump is now officially ready to step into the White House later this month. And as far as I know, he will be the first convicted felon to serve as president. Do you
Felonious
know of any
Trump.
others?
That's his new name, Felonious Trump. There, with apologizing to Monk.
So, what do you think about that?
It gives me a headache actually trying to think about it.
It shouldn't, though. It shouldn't. You know, there's an interesting thing about this Donald Trump fixation that so many of us have, and I guess he's kind of inescapable now. He's everywhere you look. He's certainly all over media, and on the sort of left or Democrats, whatever you want to call it, you know, people who are not MAGA. I mean, it's kind of like a broad set of people who have negative thoughts about Donald Trump, including some that voted for him. But there's a common, I guess, perception. It appears to me that people believe that Donald Trump can somehow operate outside of politics, that political friction will not be a thing for him, that whatever he wants to do, he'll just do. And they're freaking out about it. And it's like, you know, you're talking about extreme things that pretty much nobody could really do because we're still in the USA. And a lot of the laws that we've had and customs that we've had and perceptions that we've had still exist. People still want to be okay. They want to be safe. They want to get, you know, they want to get their weekly or biweekly or monthly paycheck and get it on time. They want to be able to step into a decent job. They don't want to be arrested and thrown in jail because they, you know, said sitting in a bar that Trump is an asshole. I mean, it's not like the doors just open wide for him and the light shown and he can just step right in and do whatever the fuck he pleases.
Yeah,
So
he
people need to get over that. And the problem with that, the problem with feeling that way is that you kind of open up that reality a bit more than it really should be open. We should understand that the people in the USA matter and that it's really about us. It's not about the government. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about us. And, there's a huge diversity of people and a diversity of needs and a diversity of perceptions and a diversity of thoughts about how things should go. And that all has to be honored. You can't just put everything you don't like aside and go with what you like.
Well, the whole problem with Trump is he has the same problem a lot of our generation has. His memory is fading. He forgets the problems that he created for himself in Trump 1.0 when he promised all these grand things and the reality stepped in and said, no, no, you can't do that. There is a process. And it's hard when you deal with a government, it is really hard to escape the process. It's been in place for a long time, and there are a lot of people who have their finger on the scale to make it's like, well, we're going to equalize it a little bit. So there's a lot of pushback just from the system. And we've seen it in other administrations. Clinton wanted to do a lot of things that didn't get done. Richard Nixon promised a lot of things. They didn't get done, and he got undone by the system because the process back then was a lot more honest and equal between the parties because they actually were still bipartisan in a little bit, and they were able to, you know, give the country a break from Richard Nixon, and they tried to make a break from President Trump 1.0, but that didn't work out because the Republican Party has changed dramatically from what it used to be.
And maybe there's no way to really effectively govern a country this big without screwing something up here or there, you know? But but the main thing is that if you're in the position of being the leader of the country, the president or whatever, then you really have to be accountable to the people and open to the people and not completely self-interested. And I think that this is what really gets Trump in trouble ultimately, even though, he seems to be able to slide through like Teflon. Um, and he's probably as toxic as Teflon too. But but you can't just refute the will of the people and honor only your own self-interest persistently and survive really. And I think that Trump has really been about himself all along. He really tries to do the things that are best for him. He's not, he's obviously not the kind of person who gives much thought, has much empathy for the people, or gives much thought to what the people need, that sort of thing. Whatever he might have convinced people. I mean, he's convinced a certain set of followers that he's got their back, and I don't really think he has.
Yeah, I think it's
But
going to be interesting when he has to deal with other nations, not the ones that love him, like Russia and a few others, but when he has to deal with people in NATO who hear him saying these ridiculous things, he's going to buy Greenland, he's going to take over the Panama Canal and maybe even Canada. That is the it's made us the laughing stock of the sane world. People go like, what did you elect? This guy is delusional.
well, I did hear that there were some people up in Greenland who were saying, "Oh, cool, we're going to be Americans."
There's always a few nut cases in any country.
I don't think
We have
it
plenty
was a
of them.
wide, yeah, I don't think it was a widely held perception, but
Yeah. Plus, the Danish government does not like the whole idea anyway. It's been part of the It's one of their autonomous territories for centuries.
Yeah, a long time. Well, shoot. So we're probably not going to buy Greenland.
No, and the
I
Panama
kind of, I
Canal.
mean, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go to Greenland and, you don't have to take your passport or anything. You just kind of go. Uh, and, the Panama Canal, um, we've controlled it before. We might try to control it again. I don't think the people down there are going to like it that much. But the more interesting thing is that I think Trump started referring to Justin Trudeau as Governor Trudeau. And
That went over well.
yeah, kind of assuming that Canada would just become another state.
Well, now
And
Canada wants to annex some of us. They want to, I think, three of the northern states and maybe Alaska, just so that they could even things out. One of their members of parliament came up with that idea. I think they wanted Minnesota and Wisconsin.
yeah, I mean, we assumed that we were in a relatively stable world, and all it took was electing a jackass president, somebody who kind of doesn't understand what the limitations are. And the thing is, if you don't understand the limitations, it turns out some of the limitations are less limiting than we thought they were. And you just kind of breeze past them. I don't know. It's kind of a weird time to be around. I think that people who are completely freaking out and, kind of planning an exodus to Mars and that sort of thing because they think that it's going to be unlivable here. Or, a lot of people are talking about moving out of the country or moving to a different state, maybe. Of course, if you're in a different state, you're still within the USA, so you're still within that government. Um, I don't think that leaving is a great solution myself. Certainly, if people want to leave, more power to them. But one of the problems is that if all the good guys leave, then you only have bad guys left.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I had friends who departed during the Nixon years. They went to Canada or wherever. They came back, almost all of them anyway. And I know people recently who said that, they're moving to Europe or wherever. And yeah, that's great. But I survived the Nixon years, and I was a loudmouth journalist. So, they didn't come and take me away and change. They tried with a number of journalists, but there's still people who are speaking up and trying to let people know that there are right and wrong ways of running a government, and no matter how hard you know felonious Trump tries to modify the way the country runs, he's gonna have a lot harder time than I think he imagines, even with the friend of his fellow felon, Elon Musk.
That lives just right down the street, right? Our Austin guy, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, I think the real message that I'm getting is that the United States is not a tribe. There's a bunch of tribes in the United States. It's not a tribe. And the question is, what coalitions can you build? And we have like two very broad coalitions that are about equal. You know,
Mhm.
we have, but really, they're coalitions of people who don't necessarily agree with each other. And this is the other thing about the problem for Trump, where he is going to have friction. There's a lot of people in his own party that don't agree with him. They might have gone along just to get a Republican in the White House, but they're not necessarily going to go along with his crazy ideas at all. And, on the other side, some people say left, that may be questionable. I was reading something not long ago that Ted Gioia published that talked about how that it's not really a question of left and right, it's a question of up and down. You've got people who are here. I mean, you've got the 1% and then the rest of us, and there's gradations going down. And I guess that really says it's not so much about ideology as it is about class. But whatever the case, you have a bunch of tribes, a bunch of different sets of people. Probably no two people think alike, and certainly no two tribes have the same, focus and preferences. And somehow you got to pull it all together and make things work. And I think that's just really hard,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
yeah, there are Republicans with a conscience and with some morals. I watched an interview with Adam Kinzinger, a former GOP rep, and
Yeah.
he was he sounded sane. He was not
Well, yeah.
he was not falling down to worship the new emperor. And Liz Cheney, I was never a big fan of hers, but I'm more in favor of her than a lot of the people that are now dominating in the GOP.
Well, the real question for the GOP is what do you really think government is for? And I think the answer is not much. I mean, they talk about having smaller government. But the interesting thing is that while they want small government, they don't mind having government regulate some things that is really no fucking business of government. And I'm thinking, about a woman's right to choose about her own body. And I'm thinking about a person's right to choose, you know, their gender. I mean, you're born either one or the other. Some people are born kind of both. That's a rare thing. But that's sex. Your sex is like male or female at birth. Your gender is more of a social construct, as I understand it. And I know plenty of people who decided that they did not feel comfortable presenting as a male or a female, and they, regardless of their sex, they wanted to present as a different sex or gender, really. So they wanted to make the switch, and they were not crazy. There was nothing wrong with them. And this wasn't something that they were taught somewhere. It's not something somebody convinced them to do. It was some deep inner feeling. I know somebody who he was like in his 40s before he could actually come out about it, admit, I'm really not, I've never been comfortable as a guy. And I really want to wear dresses,
Mm.
and I want to wear makeup and I want to do, I want to do have a social presentation of gender as female.
Yeah, I've never
Why would
had a
anybody care about that?
yeah, I've never had a problem with that. I had
Yeah.
friends in the Bay Area when I was living in the Bay Area. Had a male friend who didn't want to be male, and he wore a Popeye T-shirt that says "I am what I am," and that's all what I am. And he he presented as female, and it didn't bother me. I mean, you know, it's
Well,
whatever
apparently
floats your boat, really.
the issue is that you might accidentally have somebody who was born a male come into a woman's bathroom
Mhm.
and go into a stall and take a leak or something like that. And it's like, who cares? You know, who cares whether there's mixtures of people in bathrooms that are out? I've actually been in unisex bathrooms before. I mean, big ones where both sexes could come in, and there were like stalls, and people couldn't, they couldn't like gawk at each other's private parts or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
my wife has done just that of going into the men's bathroom because women's bathrooms at big events are usually a big, long line. And if you have to go, she said, I'm just going to walk in and say, hey, I've got to go and don't let me bother you and just get on with her business and leave. And, a lot of people would be weirded out. But she never got in trouble because of that. It's just she was just cutting to the chase. It's, she had business to do and she went and did it.
Yeah, I remember when I was a little boy, about 21 years old, I was in San Francisco and I was waiting to go into the men's room. And a woman came out of the ladies' room and she said, just go in there. Why not? You know, which I did. And,
Now,
there was no real trauma involved.
yeah, it's
I
just
was surprised. I expected the sky to fall, but
it's a strange world we live in. Pe- Some people love to be indoctrinated, and they get uncomfortable when someone tries to tell them, "Well, it's not always that way for everyone." No, it's got to be that way for everyone. That's a big Republican speaking point there. It's like it's abnormal. We can't allow it.
yeah, I mean, there's religions like that who believe that if you're not part of their religion, then you're going to burn in hell. And, I don't, I just don't share those beliefs. And you can't strong arm me to get me to share those beliefs. And if you actually try to do that, or if you try to force me into your religion, then you're going to burn in hell. Simple as that.
Yep, well, it's just it's life in the 21st century. It all these problems happened in the 20th century as well, and it probably was just as widespread, but media has changed, so it's easier to hear all of these divergent views being trumpeted at us on social media, and
Trumped at us.
yeah, trumped at us. Blowing your Trump. Oh, that just made me cringe. I must
Well, in the in
apologize
the
for that.
in the 20th century, we were coming to the end of a fairly established era of, started with print and it evolved that we through print we had a way to like share content in physical form where everybody got the same document and all that. And I don't know, that led to all sorts of things. That led to the kinds of big governments that we have now and uh, mass media, all of those things. That all ran all through the 20th century. And then by the 21st century, we had the internet. So we were out of the print era and we were into an era where it wasn't so top down. It was really very bottom up. And it wasn't one to many, it was many to many.
Hmm.
And that, I mean, anytime you have a shift like that, just the shift alone causes a lot of chaos. And I think that we're in the middle of something like that. It's a chaotic time because we have not got our bearings.
The top-down approach now is billionaires against the rest of us. And speaking of billionaires, I just clicked on a news thing that came out yesterday, I
Hmm.
believe. And in Fortune magazine, gamers are accusing Elon Musk of cheating at popular video games by turning to loopholes and hiring better users to play for him. And this is in the game Diablo 4. It's like, why? And why does that matter? Let's go hire a bunch of people to represent Scoop Sweeney, and they probably could do a better job. But who cares?
Well, Elon Musk is he's an AI.
No, there's too much
You, you
intelligence
know,
in the name AI.
his intelligence is purely artificial.
Oh, yeah, now yeah, that's a good point there. It's all a simulation. He actually is just a collection of bits and bytes living on some weird hard drive somewhere.
Well, this is where some of that friction comes in that I was talking about earlier. Um, Elon Musk and the what some people refer to as tech bros, but the guys who run the big tech companies, they don't necessarily agree with the MAGA people. And one point of disagreement that already has substantial visibility is disagreement about um, the HB1 visas for tech workers, and it's like you've got a bunch of people who were pretty well trained to be absolutely opposed to any form of immigration. And then you have some people who jump into the coalition who completely depend on a particular kind of immigration.
Mm.
And they're not giving it up, right?
Yeah,
And they're powerful. If there was a conflict between the tech bros and the MAGAs, I think the tech bros would win, right?
yeah, yeah. They have a lot of influence, if you will. I experienced the whole visa thing back when I was in a previous life as an IT manager. I had a team of programmers in India that I had to supervise, and they were good. These were good people. They were really good programmers. And on the other hand, I had friends in our data center who were let go because they were no longer needed because there was a cheaper programmer who could do the same work. So it was in that time, this was a lot of outsourcing going on, and it was bad for some people and good for others. It's just that's the way technology has worked, or sometimes failed to work historically.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story. Um, I once applied for a job as a project manager at Dell, if you can imagine that. And in the interview, they talked to me about my management style, and I would say it's collegial that I try to work very cooperatively with the members of the team and yeah, kind of be open to them and that sort of thing. Anyway, so I said all of this, and I had to go through. I was interviewed by four people or so, and the last person who came in to talk to me asked me how it had gone, and I said that I explained kind of what I'd said, and she said, "Yeah, you're not going to get the job." She said they want somebody who's brutal. They want somebody who will crack the whip. They've got a team of people, and this was for a team of people, I think, in India too. And it says they got a team of people over there who they feel needs to really be ruled with an iron hand, that they're slackers or whatever.
It
And I
sounds like
thought, wow,
you really dodged a bullet by not getting
I
that
did,
job.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, imagine. I mean, it was kind of a reluctant thing because I had heard some negative stories about that particular company.
mhm.
Um, uh, just about the internals of it, that it could be a difficult place to work. So,
Well, you had the Whole Foods thing too. That turned into a difficult company, didn't it?
well, Whole Foods was actually, I mean, it was the CEO of Whole Foods, John Mackey, and John's a libertarian, and he kind of believed in empowering people as much as possible, and he wanted the the stores to have a lot of say about how they operated, and he wanted the individual people in the company uh, to have input. Not all the managers throughout Whole Foods agreed with that, so that was one source of possible friction. Um, but I mean, I I didn't think Whole Foods was a difficult place to work. I think that it was. I mean, in some ways, it was a pretty nice place to work. But I do think that it was, how can I put it? Well, so we were working on a project that, well, it was a pretty big project, and it was supposed to be um, it was something that could have been a competitor to Amazon, really. It
Mm.
was a multi-business unit project. And the problem there was that they kind of didn't understand what we were building. I mean, I think John understood it, but I think overall the company and the board didn't completely understand it. And they also didn't understand that the dot, and a lot of people didn't understand that the dot-com bust was going to be a transient thing.
Mm.
The dot-com bust was not the end of the internet, as some people thought at the time. And it certainly made it hard to get work as an internet professional for a while because people had sort of given up on the internet. Internet wasn't going to go away. It was clear. It was clear to those of us who were part of it and committed to it that was a bump in the road and not the end of the road. And I think that that was really the biggest problem there was that they decided to end that project, which I think it would have been the project would have been okay, and it probably would have done really well. And maybe Whole Foods would own Amazon now instead of the reverse.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of people, not people, but companies that were negatively impacted by bad decisions like, well, we're just going to avoid the internet completely because it's already died. The dot-com bust happened, and that turned out, like you said, not it wasn't the case. It was just a passing phase. It's kind of like when people are growing up, they go through puberty and things change. Maybe that was you know, the internet going through its puberty.
Well, we might have been better off if they had been right, though. I mean, the internet has created problems, all sorts of problems. And part of it is the direction that we took from there. It got very focused on, I mean, the internet, I guess, ecosystem became more and more about money
Mm.
and less about people,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, if you look at the goings on at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and all those associated businesses, it's just become a total shit show now. They killed off their DEI policies and programs, and they're getting rid of fact checkers. It's like, come on, people. Just because Trump is, you know, angry at you, you don't go and just say, well, I'm going to go worship at the feet of an emperor now. That's basically what Zuckerberg is doing. He's kissing the toe of the new emperor.
God, it's terrible of me, but my focus on Zuckerberg when he was making his latest pronouncement is like on that Grubel 4C watch. And I'm thinking, if I start a GoFundMe, do you think I could raise $900,000 and buy one of those watches? He's got a very nice watch there. It never occurred to me that you could have a watch that cost almost $1 million, and I would lose it if I had it.
It boggles my mind. I haven't worn a watch in 20 years probably because I have devices that have big displays say it's 10 o'clock.
I quit wearing a watch until I got this Apple Watch, and now I only wear it because it's not, I mean, I don't care about it as a watch. It's really it's a tracker.
Mhm.
It helps me keep track of how much energy I'm expending and how my heart rate's going and how my sleep is going and all of that. Those are my only uses of this thing. And
Yeah,
I have to wear it for that.
I'd considered doing that sort of thing, but I really don't want to know what shape I'm in because I have a good idea. It's probably terrifying in there, and I really don't want to hear from my body.
Well, I mean, to each his own. I was very interested early on in something that it was actually Kevin Kelly. You know who Kevin Kelly is, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so Kevin was uh, into something that he called quantified self, and it was really just kind of an insight he had that uh, we now have the technology to be able to track our bodies, to keep track of what's going on. And originally, you'd have to take measurements however you could do it and add them to your own little database about your body. And I never really got it. I couldn't be really persistent about capturing all that data. But as we started to have devices to do that, I think I originally had a Fitbit. Uh, I mean, I thought it was pretty handy to have a device, especially to have a device that uh, could tell me whether my heart rate is fairly stable, and for me that's important because I have had bouts of atrial fibrillation, and being able to track my heart rate is a boon to me. Uh, but people have all kinds of reasons to want to be able to do health tracking, and I and others have advocated for not only for having these kinds of devices for that, but also for having access to the data that our healthcare providers are gathering. And that's starting to happen kind of slowly, gradually. I find that now, for instance, I've had a couple of surgeries and I can go back and read the surgery notes, a complete documentation of how the surgery went. And they've made that accessible to me. I think that's great. Though on the other hand, I can imagine some people who wouldn't even want to look at that, you
Well,
know.
there's another side to that whole thing is I think one of the reasons I've kind of avoided that is I read too much science fiction where people get trackers and they're able to you know see what you're up to. And the whole idea of having your DNA, out available online. That that whole ancestry thing is a bit scary to me because it's great for you to know, but there are many things about what's going on in your body and in your health and in your life that you really don't want to share with the rest of the world. And the ransomware takeover of Ascension hospitals through a lot of the nation, particularly here in Austin, caused a lot of medical data to be shared out. My wife just had to get a new Medicare number because someone accessed her information, and Medicare sent her a letter saying, "We've noticed unusual activity on your card, so we're going to have to give you a new number." And they sent her a new Medicare card number. And
Wow.
that's disturbing to have. There are people. That could have just been a bunch of weird kid hackers, but I doubt it. It's multinational crime that's going on online, and they're getting into not just medical data. They're getting into all sorts of data. We have companies that have big storehouses of license plate reader data, so you can find out where someone's been, forever, I guess. It's concerning. Yeah, I would rather keep my data private, and the more things you sign up for, the less private you are.
Well, that's true. Some of us are okay taking the risk. We figure that the reward we're getting is sufficient for the risk. I definitely like being able to access all these things. I don't know I'm not completely clear what somebody would do with my health data. I did watch um, a rewatch an older movie the other day called Gattaca. Did you see Gattaca?
Hmm.
Do you remember that movie? So in that film, there's a guy whose mother insists on having him without any kind of intervention to improve his uh, genes,
Mm.
eugenics, genetic modification, which is just starting to be a thing. And by the time he has a brother, his brother is born, the the mom and dad have decided they're on board with genetic modification. So he has a brother who has the kind of like optimized genes that everybody else is getting, but he doesn't have it. And people who have not been optimized are called invalid, and people who have been optimized are valid. And they'll screen you to see whether you're valid or invalid in certain contexts where there's uh, a prohibition of invalid people being involved. And it happens that our guy wants to be in the space program. He wants to be one of the people who goes to, I think it was Titan, and he manages to conceal the fact that he's invalid, and he manages to work and avoid some of the downsides of his particular gene selection that are predicted for him, and is he's getting all set to go on uh, this voyage to Titan, but at the same time, I mean, the whole movie is about his risk of being found out.
And that's the fear of many people. There's all the data is out there, and if an unscrupulous company can access your data when you're hiring or applying for a job, and maybe it's the company's being run by a white nationalist, and he wants to know, what's your genetic makeup? Oh, you had a Native American ancestor. That's not what nationalism is all about. So we can't hire you. That's a far-fetched look at it, but that's perfectly believable that there would be companies who would go to those links because they don't want any unwelcome people in their company.
Dude, if he's a white nationalist, I don't want to work for him.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of times they don't tell you that. That's just who they are. And
Yeah.
people make decisions based on their prejudices. And I'd rather not give any more ammunition than they need.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's any way around it, really. We're all pretty much data objects at this point, or
Hmm.
at least that's one aspect of our existence, and probably inescapable. There's, of course, there's a lot of, uh, I guess, anxiety about AI right now, artificial intelligence. And I mean, I hear some people saying that they just don't like it, even though they don't really know much about it. I just don't like the idea. Um, and the vast misunderstandings of what AI really, what we're really talking about, or, the large language models specifically are the ones that are. This is kind of so the new thing is the large language models being implemented in such a way that you can have generative AI. You make a prompt. Basically, you're making a query, but the query that you make is in, just conventional language, and the response you get is a well-written conventional language response. And that kind of creeps people out. It's like, wow, that thing really gets me.
Yeah, the
But
performing artists are very much up in arms about that because a lot of the entertainment companies are trying to get people to agree to allow them to do a digital version of them. And that's just, that's basically say, well, I'm no longer going to be myself. I'm going to literally sell my soul to the government, not the
we have
government,
to
to the
do
company.
we have to do an interview with Will Kreth, a friend of mine who has a company that is all about licensing your digital being. Um, I mean, he's going to work with artists to, I guess, help them negotiate uh, lucrative licensing deals.
Now,
If I understand what his company does correctly, I should.
so is he licensing them, getting them to agree to be artificially created or to govern the rights to their persona?
The rights, yeah, govern the rights to their persona.
Yeah, yeah,
And, I
that's
mean,
kind of an attorney kind of thing.
I say, hey, go ahead and use my persona if you want to, as long as you pay me
Yeah, yeah,
this many
and that's
zeros,
that's the objection a lot of people have to some of the stuff that AI has been used for, and it's copyright infringement. And there are a lot of artists who would say, "I see my stuff in this depiction that didn't really happen in real life, but I was the source of part of it." And
Yeah.
yeah, anyone that's a creator, would object to seeing your baby being, you uh, put into a situation that never occurred.
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on how your work is being. I mean, so uh, potentially a large language model can just kind of suck up tons and tons of data, and that data can include all kinds of content that was produced and that people were paid to create, or that people own and own copyright to. But the question is, to me, is what I mean, copyright is copyright is an exact copy of your thing being sold without any compensation to you? Or is it just like maybe a fragment, something that might qualify as fair use? And I think that's an unanswered question right now. And I mean, I I'm not exactly sure how to address it. I kind of think it's going to be kind of like what they did with music publishing, I guess it is, where you have one big group that collects money from other big groups to compensate people for various uses of their intellectual property.
And that's been a big issue for, particularly for musicians, because there are companies that claim that they're, reimbursing or paying the artist, but the rates are so low that they aren't really compensating the artist fairly compared with what other uh, groups like SoundScan, you know, listens to what is, or they track what's being used online and on radio and TV, and you have to pay a license fee for use of someone's music.
Yeah, I
And
kind of wonder about that though. So let's say your song is played on the radio, you get a royalty for that, right?
sort of, yeah, but you get a small amount.
You get a small amount. So now your song is being played here and there by people on demand,
Hmm.
and you may reach an even smaller set of listeners or a large set, whatever. And uh, you're getting a small amount for that. I'm not. I've never been clear that people are getting less for their music than they might have got for the same number of listens. It's
It,
just
it
been unclear to me.
it's I've heard from a number of different artists who are not extremely well known, but they had product out there that they relied upon for royalties, and the royalties have since the things like Apple Music and Spotify and all those came along, their royalties have gone way down because those services pay a very small amount, pennies per listen, and it's good money for the superstars, the people who have billions of
Well,
listeners.
who negotiated those amounts?
Uh, the well, let's see. I'm not sure who the actual negotiation was. It didn't involve the artists themselves. The artists are signed to either ASCAP or BMI for their copyright protection.
And if they're unhappy with the return that they're getting from those services, why do they continue to leave their music on those services?
It's a matter of I really don't have an answer for that because I've never really known anybody who tried to get it off. It's they're trying to get whatever play. It's they're not
I
going
mean,
to
I
That's not going to be reimbursed fairly, but you don't want to just completely get out of the game because name recognition helps you. People are really only making money from live performances. Royalties for records have gone, to the point where it's really not worth it to rely only on your royalties from record sales because
But how is that different from before? I mean, I heard that same thing before we ever had streaming services. People would say the record companies were cheating them, or the record company after they charged off the costs of recording studios and things like that, that there was no money left, and they were saying that the only money that they were making was the money they were making from performances. And I mean, we heard Robert Fripp say in our last uh, program that the cost of touring was so high that they essentially didn't make any money doing that either.
yeah, that was 1979, which was a different world. I was working in a lot of music endeavors in those times, and you actually could make more money off of recordings, and touring was good if you had a good tour manager and a good record company. But what he was complaining, about the situation then, but right now you talk to any touring artist and they make their real money off of the live performance and particularly the merchandising. There's big money in the merchandising that they sell at their concerts. The royalties they get in, unless they're a superstar, a Beyonce or a Jay-Z or whoever, those folks make good money. But
But their chance of
they have the power to negotiate a much more lucrative deal than your average artist can.
but the average artist never did make much money, right?
No, actually, I managed a band that recorded and had albums out, and we made a pretty good amount of money. We released stuff in Germany that made us a lot of money, but it was because the Germans really didn't mind paying a decent royalty.
Yeah, and that's changed now because you have global streaming,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Everything suffered, in the music business. The big corporations, Sony's making a bundle off of all of this.
Well, I guess one solution is something like Bandcamp, where musicians can get most of the money from selling
Yeah,
their digital albums.
that's become more lucrative. You can actually sell a vinyl album. There are services that will produce a vinyl album on demand. It's expensive, but you can get it done through, I'm not sure if it's part of Bandcamp or a separate thing, but I was just reading the other day of people who were getting, a streaming services that also would sell them either a CD or a vinyl album. And
All
vinyl
right.
has taken off like crazy. You can look behind me and see vinyl. Yeah, my new uh, motto for my company is the house that analog built because I started out doing all analog. Of course, I've
Yeah,
got way more digital stuff now. I'm on my
as we all do.
I'm on my new Apple Mac Mini, which I just love.
I
That's
mean, I have tons of musical recordings, mostly CDs. I got rid of most of my vinyl over the years and then collected a bunch of CDs. But I've owned a lot of music in my life, in my 70 million years. And um, now I'm getting comparable quality by streaming from Apple Music, but I can't seem to get that same quality from other streaming services.
Mhm.
And I feel pretty good about Apple Music, partly because they have high quality lossless streaming. Some of it is pretty sophisticated, like Dolby Atmos stuff. And also because my understanding is that they pay more to artists than the other streaming services. They may not pay a lot, but I think they pay more.
Yeah, it's probably a matter of pennies, really, because most artists don't get a whole lot of money off of any of the services. And as far as analog, I, yeah, I'm just one of those nutcases that really likes the feel and of using analog. You know, the album, like, yeah, grab one here and
All righty.
grab it at random. This one says the Moody Blues, and
Oh,
it was one of their albums that came out,
yeah.
and it's big, and you can read
Yeah.
it. Tried reading one of the inserts on a CD. You have to get your microscope out. You're like, what is this letter? And
Well, and you don't even have that capability if you're just streaming stuff.
yeah, with streaming it, you know, I'm, I just I like analog. I also like digital. I do a lot of digital production, and it's just a matter of you know. During the you know situations where the internet was down, people were losing their minds. All I did was I put on a record, because there's some music. Okay, there's a record player there, or I could slap a cassette. I have a cassette player right here underneath my reel-to-reel recorder. I can play that, and I can stream it all over the house because I'm a network that goes everywhere, and I just plug it into the digital interface. So analog to digital sounds just fine.
We're going to be pretty screwed when the big electromagnetic pulse comes.
And yeah, that's another really big thing. My
Yeah.
paranoia. I once again read too much science fiction where, you know, I I watched The Matrix, and they had their secret little button they push, to wipe out the electronics, and that's all doable. But you probably would have to use a nuclear device, which also does that kind of thing. But I'm sure some evil scientist has a real big electromagnetic pulse generator that's just
I
a
I
little.
just I remember when we had that spectrum outage and everybody was sort of like out in the street, just kind of wandering around looking lost and saying, did your spectrum go out? Yeah, did yours? We
That
all lost it.
gave you an opportunity to go out into the fresh air, and
Talk to people.
it
Yeah,
your
yeah.
interfaces with the real world. That's one thing I try to force myself to do is turn off the machines. I have a forest behind me, and I go out and walk in my forest and go, "Ooh, this is nice," and it's a very good mind clearer. It helps you get out of the digital world and into the natural world.
Yeah, I mean, we should tell people to listen only to the Plutopia News Network podcast or watch us on YouTube, and the rest of the time, put your devices aside and go walk around outside.
That's what I'm going to do in just a few minutes because we're just about out of time here.
We are just about out of time. And we probably should mention to people that we have a website at plutopia.io and that there is a link on that website to PayPal or to Patreon. We have both. And that you can give us money.
And we have a YouTube channel that has a lot of listeners, and we try to encourage those folks to also come to our website and tell us how much you love us, or hate us, or whatever. We're open to input.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, then you should know that we also have a podcast, and you can suck us right into your podcast app and listen to us anytime there.
Or you can go to YouTube and see how pretty we are. We're
oh my God,
a couple of pretty guys.
Frightening, actually.
I just scared myself a little there.
We're kind of old. I think that influencers tend to be younger than we are.
No, we
We're
are.
the oldest influencers around.
I prefer the wine view. We are vintage.
I think we're out of time, too.
And out of our minds, probably. So
Yeah.
until next time, John, it's been a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you, sir. We will talk to you and to everyone else soon enough.
Later, Gator.
Adios.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lebkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.